Growing up as one of 8 girls in what Sarah Stratton called a rowdy household, there wasn't a lot of time for quiet contemplation. But early on, Sarah knew she loved learning, and despite some challenges along the way, she hasn't really stopped. Sarah found her voice a while back. She did live with 7 sisters after all, but by embarking on a Master of Technological Futures program, she found the courage to speak up and hone her thoughts around acceptance within disruption. As a respected figure with a message worth listening to, Sarah is now busy challenging the status quo of diversity within the digital world. She's even managed to score herself a seat at the World Economic Forum, where she shares our unique culture globally.
Well, kia ora, Sarah. Thank you for taking some time out to kōrero with me today. I actually want to start back with where you grew up, and if you could tell me a little bit about what you were like as a kid.
Kia ora, kia ora. Kanui te mihi ki a koe. Thank you for this opportunity. Growing up, well, I'm one of 8 girls, and we grew up in a rowdy household. I always think it was rather like the circus. You never know what other child or family you'd come home to be living at our home, and Mum and Dad had this amazing open door policy, and it was circus-like is what the family was like, what our whānau was like. And my mum is from the far north, we're Ngāti Hine, Ngāti Kahu, up at Motito, up at Karaponia. So every holidays we'd mainly got to Karaponia, which is in Awanui, with our grandmother. She was our mainstay, she was our heart. I'm going to even cry thinking about her. She was the still in that circus. She and my aunties and uncles that we all went to stay with every weekend. We all wanted to live there. So we grew up in Mount Eden, going to Epsom Normal Primary, Epsom Normal Intermediate, Epsom Girls Grammar, you know. And for us, for my mum was the first Maori to ever go to Epsom Girls. So they were brought up. My grandmother said, my children are going to grow up in this Pākehā world and they're going to do better than them. That is what, honestly, that is what she was told. So they were sent, and my uncle's first Maori at Auckland Boys. And so we had all of this going on. And our dad was a huge character within himself, and he was Pākehā. And everyone up north, they loved him because he was unusual, but he was himself, like he was very huge. Anyway, so I was a quiet kid amongst the chaos, not with my younger sisters, but otherwise a quiet, timid kind of kid. I love sport, I love playing, I love school, I loved learning. I just loved that kind of life. I loved justice, even as a young kid. I think that's who I was really.
So in amongst all these 8 children, parents, grandparents, aunties and uncles and all that kind of thing, did you find, you said you were quiet, did you find moments to start thinking about where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do and be influenced by your mum and dad? They sound amazing people.
Yeah, well, even as little kids, so we're sort of like a family of three lots of us, but myself and my 2 younger ones. So we'd play. Often a game that we played was judge, lawyer, defendant. And that was, I'd write all the scripts. I was always the judge. One of my sisters was always the lawyer, and one of my sisters, the baby, she always had to be the criminal. And I'm talking 6, 7, 8, I enjoyed deliberating over their lives and that sort of power. And there was that aspect to that, how I was influenced, the sense, watching, honestly, the way my mum was treated at times, the way my grandmother was treated, and my aunties and uncles. You know, as a kid, you're trying to figure it all out. And all you could feel was a hurt, a stab, when you saw how demeaned your mother could be in public. When my mother, too, was one of the first Maori women to be ever given an Oxford scholarship because she was so brainy. My uncle, he was so brainy, he got UE at 14, and in the Commonwealth's officers' exams, he got the highest, but he could not find a job here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So you knew all of that. That all went on. So you had layers of all sorts of stuff that went on in you. and I'm much paler than some of my other sisters. You knew that as well. These are more the unseen things that go on. You know, you're not conscious of anything as a kid, you're just feeling injustice. So there used to be a guy in the bus depot, and he was disabled. He was mentally disabled, and he used to sell flowers. And if we were ever walking past and my mother did not buy a flower, I just used to cry my eyes out and say to her, how could you walk past him and not do that? This is little. So that's sort of what's in me. But I hated that part of me because it hurt and I could do nothing. I was powerless. That's the overwhelming feeling I think I felt as a kid, is a great powerlessness. And that started to inform my decisions.
So you're obviously a person who feels their emotions quite strongly, and that obviously then ended up being the direction that you went in. You took how you felt and you started to apply it. And your CV is not run-of-the-mill. So what did you go on to do then? What was your career path?
Oh, well, at 14, just like everyone else, I started trying, I was going to parties and things like this. And what I didn't know was that for me, that choice of drugs and alcohol was going to be the most prominent deciding factor of the next 10 years of my life. And so there I was, you know, and I was on this little trajectory and I was a very compliant, good kid, and I was winning the English and the history prizes and the French prizes at school, to boom, getting kicked out of school and on a journey of alcohol and drug addiction. And that really did take a big chunk of my early life. And then at 24, when I had a baby, I realised, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I sought help, and I thought, you know, amongst all the chaos, I know I'm going to try and be a lawyer, of all things, because that's what my grandfather wanted from my mother. My mother never did it. My mother kept pushing for one of us to do it. I'm sixth, and none of the other five had done it. And at 24, I was grappling with life in a horrible addiction and being a single mum. So I did two things. I enrolled in university as an off chance, and I tried to get sober. And I weirdly got into law school. And at the same time, I moved much more toward being sober as well. So these two things were going on, and then I got into law school. So one would think, wow, triumphant, you know, yay, she got sober and she's in law school. And I became even the co-president of the Maori Law Students Society. And then this is my life has been like this, woo, and then crash, and then crash. I've stayed sober, but like you said about my emotions, they have run so wildly that then what was happening at law school, we were having the fisheries protests and the media protests for Maori and all of this, and it was so confronting, and I'm such a sensitive soul, and I hate to even admit it, but I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle that much confrontation and conflict, especially when I'm just so raw with just being early sober and this brand new mother. And so I kind of hid. I got my degree, and then I had a second baby, you know, and I just hid away, thinking, you know what, I'm going to do something. How can I make an impact in the world? Well, I'm going to, I was going to say indoctrinate, but I'm going to embed this whole belief that I found from the law, from learning law and how it was the tool of real colonization. I'm going to teach my own children to feel good about who they are, so that my mother and my grandmother, that no one ever has to feel like them again. And so I'd instilled it in them, and so I did other things. I joined their kuras and their bilingual units and their sports teams, and hurled myself in these semi sort of hidden things. And I remember making children's wear, actually, that had the reo on it, and selling it to people, thinking if they slowly were indoctrinated into Maori, thinking they wouldn't know what was happening to them, and it'd be all really gentle, because I don't like the sledgehammer approach. I went and lived in France, and I was back home, and I met Maru Neho, and she's a woman that does metia games. I didn't know her. I'd sort of been doing some creative writing. They said, what and I saw this ad saying, if you're thinking of writing for film and television, what about gaming? Anyway, I met her, and right at the end, she said, Sarah, oh yeah, that's right. She goes, Sarah, right, that's right. I just did my master's at this place called Tech Futures Lab. I think you should do it. And I went, I'm not going to, because one, I don't agree with I'm just so, whatever. I don't agree with the education system and the indoctrination of that institution. And I don't have anything to do with digital technology. I don't know anything about it, you know? And she just said, hang on a minute. And she just dialed up and she said, oh, I'm just going to make an appointment for you there. And she did it. I met them and I ended up doing that master's. And all that I found was that everything I'd thought about back at law school, and that is you need the solution for the terrible statistics of Maori in society. It's because you need Maori right at the beginning stages when you create society. We need to be there to start reflecting back to ourselves who we really are in our own society. We need that in the laws. When I started reading about algorithmic bias, I just thought, oh my God, it's no different. It's institutional racism, but now we're doing digital. That's the analog version. This is the digital version. So I knew what my master's was going to be. It was going to be, okay, if I think the solution is we need Maori at the beginning of all things, I need to try and figure out how that's going to be. And that was my master's.
Is it fair to say that you say things like, oh, and then I just got my law degree, and I was a single mum, and I was all these things which for a lot of people would be quite full on. You don't just push the boat out a little bit, you push it right out if you're going to.
Well, one could say I'm a little bit all or nothing, kind of extreme. Yeah, I learnt that. I have learnt that.
What I wonder is that then when your friend said, I've got this course that you could join up, and you kind of went, oh, no. It is a bit scary, isn't it? For a lot of people, like you're probably like me, grew up in a world as a kid where digital wasn't even a thing until a lot later on. To embrace that as positively as you have must have been a bit of a journey.
I had 24 hours to make a decision. So in a way, I was lucky because I already know how to make quick fire decisions. If you're a recovering alcoholic and things like this, life is certain things. So I know to just go and have a look. I know not to close down a door if I haven't even investigated. There's a saying that ignorance is contempt, is contempt prior to investigation. So I always know, because I'm curious at the end of the day, to go and have a look anyway. I went and had a look and I spoke to the woman, and I'm still like this, like this, just, And she said, well, and I said, well, I live in France, I don't know how to do it, blah, blah, blah. She goes, well, don't you have a difficult decision to make in 24 hours because our course starts next Monday. Oh gosh. And so I took that and I went to the couple of people that I trust in my own whānau to talk about it. And they were just like, well, it's weird, so go with it, just see. And you have a week to trial it out before you're committed, and I did that as well. I gave it a day. I thought if I walk in and I just think, whoa, this is so, and my impression was, wow, I'm actually impressed. And it does take a lot to impress me, I must say. And I thought, I'll stay. I'll try it. I'll give it a go. This is weird, but I'm going to give it a go. I know weird quite well. So I've never lived in sort of comfortable situations. I'm trying to find a place of comfort these days. But yeah. So yeah, I will give anything a go.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call you an ordinary person, but for ordinary people who are looking to make a positive impact in the world, would you say this is quite a good place to start?
Absolutely. And there are short courses. There's a free course there. Because what I found is half of it is common sense, but we need to feel confident in our common sense. And the other half is language. If we don't have a language, if people are using language like, oh, I'll see you on Slack, or have you got a digital suitcase, or whatever, that can be exclusive and excluding. And just having a bit of language, that's how powerful language is, to exclude or include.
And also, people don't have to come into it having already studied a whole lot of stuff. Life experience, as we can tell from you, counts for quite a lot.
Totally. And that's what they said to me. Even though I did have a law degree, yeah, there was a woman there who was my age who had never done a stick of academic work, but her whole career had been in a corporate setting. And they're not interested in your academic career, they're interested in you, how you see life, and what you might bring, what you're ready to learn, but what you're going to bring as well. Yeah.
From your perspective, what you ended up studying there, tell me a little bit about, because you talked about algorithmic bias before. Just explain a little bit of that, because I don't know that people necessarily know what you mean when you put it in the context of looking at through a Maori lens and also colonisation.
Yeah. Algorithms are just code. It's just a set of instructions that are in our phones to control the traffic lights. If you have a smart anything in your kitchen, turns things on, turns things off, the code that's just embedded. That's all good, functional algorithms. What becomes difficult is when that set of instruction is starting to predict human behaviour and human lives. Digital only does what people used to do on a human level. So for example, you go to a bank and apply for a mortgage. Before there was digital, they would look up manually all your transactions and your behaviour, and they'll make a human assessment, right? And that can be good and bad, because we all have our own biases and prejudices, whether we like to admit it or not, we all do. And so I'll make a call on you. Well, this time it's, say, a certain group of people are setting in what are key words to find. And if any of those things alarm the system, it's now starting to make a call on you, not a human face-to-face. It's been set into a set of instructions, into a machine, into algorithms, and it's going to start flagging. And if you also don't come up, if woman, this ethnicity, this age, if you might come outside their predictors in here, or you don't then come up, that also flags them as you're a risk. And you start putting an algorithm in front of you and not an actual human being, they're going to say no or yes based on this code. And this code here is exactly like the law. That's what the law did. It's a set of instructions about, and whether we like it or not, in that are values, you know? If it's about algorithmic bias and institutional racism, what I'm talking about there are, they represent the coders, the people that created the code, as the lawmakers were like the today's code makers. And sadly in our world today, they are the same demographic, and they are on the whole white, privileged male. And it's not that they're bad people, it's just that, well, you can, if you only ever have one demographic point of view coming through what is valuable, what's important, how does that reflect the rest of society? How is it possible that in this day and age, one demographic still determines so much of our lives? And then you put it in a machine, and people can take even less responsibility and go, well, it's not me, it's the machine. Who's going to take responsibility when people's lives are in danger? Like in America, there was a predicting tool called Compass, and it was going to predict the recidivism rate for prisoners in a prison, in this particular prison. And it's, you know, it's going to be no-brainer what the predictions were, that the white prisoners were less likely, the black prisoners were most likely. And people say, well, how is this so? It's very complicated and not, but it's all to do with the data that's been put into these codes. We need more diversity. We needed more diversity in lawmaking. We need more diversity now in all areas of digital tool making. This is the thing that is our biggest issue in our lives going forward, bigger than COVID, because it's already underlying the foundations of our whole existence, humanity's existence. I believe that we have still the chance to harness that we need to be the tool controllers and not the other way around.
Why do you feel like Maori can lead us forward in this charge?
I know it's a bold claim, and I do say it with a little smile on my face, but I mean it because in Maori culture we have a whakatauki, a proverb that says kamua kamuri, which is we move forward with our eyes squarely on the past. So it's basically, look before you leap. And there was a story about moihanga or te mahanga, who in 1805, a boat from Britain came called the Ferret, and they stayed for 6 weeks. They were so impressed. Well, they were here for an expedition. They were really impressed. They invited moihanga if he'd like to go back over. And, back in those days, his whānau were a bit torn, and his hapu were a bit torn about that. Him going was essentially like him dying to them. Who knew what was going to happen next? He would be the first Maori to ever go to Britain and take that tumultuous 12,000 k journey. They knew, they had already started to have they had already had cook in them, but some other sailors, whalers were staying. And they could just see that, they were bringing some technology that was really useful, some ways that were really useful. They wanted to know, as really tikanga, they wanted to know who is their rangatira. They've met ours in our hapu. So they said, yes, he went. And it's written in, why this is not taught in school, I do not know, because it's one of the most really important parts of our history as New Zealanders. He was received so beautifully. He was the first Maori. I don't even know what they would be like. They'd be like us going to Mars. The first Maori to be received on their land. The sights, the smells, everything like him. Anyway, he is going to meet King George IV. That is the whole purpose of that trip, to meet their rangatira. And there's contention whether he did or not, but he said he did in his oral speakings. And as far as we're concerned, oral is oral history. That is our history. There's an account of him, and he is so beautifully received. They understood, they'd written that they'd never come across such fierce people who were so emotional and so open, so on the one hand fierce, and on the other hand completely open and accessible. And it made his sight, the sights and smells that he got from that made him really know one thing. And plus, as we know, as Maori, we're not just connected to ourselves, we're connected to a greater wairua. And on his way back, he was loaded with many, gifts and tools and ways of doing things. But he was actually loaded with a vision. And the vision was that a great tsunami is coming back to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And his message was, we either ride that wave with them or like that. He knew we were equal to the task. It's so relevant to today. Anyway, he knew that we were equal to the task when he got back. Tautoko, I totally understand what happened, is he is written out of history as some totally insignificant laughingstock. And apparently in the end he was accused of stealing a chicken. He was excluded, apparently. And in writing his story, I thought, no, he wasn't. What he was coming back was so new. How would you, in a different language, how could you capture his sights and smells? In the doctor's version of how he went, he's counting because things are so vast. The enormity of everything in London back in 1806. And he tried to bring that back, and he's saying we need to, join up. There was a bit of, I know a way that we can lead this. They don't want to take us over, but they want to trade, they want to be, and he knew how to do it. Anyway, so he wasn't listened to. Somehow he wasn't listened to, but the message is being dropped from baton to baton, from generation to generation, and that is that we have to keep our ahika going, keep those burning fires of who we are, and the need for partnership, collaboration. We need to sort of keep that in us, whether we like it or not. And so when I talk about digital colonization is, as I said, it's when views, values, worldviews are laid on top of a whole other way of your thinking. with you knowing or without you knowing. And we talk about digital colonization now, because that's what's sort of been laid down and on the cables through social media, through, we can't even trust our news anymore. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. We're told, hey, you like this restaurant? You might like these next restaurants. You like that music? You might like this music. And this whole echo chamber of prediction is going on for us. That's colonization, whether we like it or not. You want to live here? Maybe you want to actually live there. You want to do this? Maybe you want to do that. We're sort of being shepherded toward a very limited, narrow funnel. That's colonization. I know that because I've come from a long line of being colonized. And though I'm white-skinned and have led a less colonized, I don't know if you can measure or judge, some people have, I can smell it, see it, I know it, and I'm like, come on, we can see this coming, can't everyone? And then I realize no, because the people that have never been colonized perhaps don't even know what's going on. But we as Maori, we see it's going to hurt us exponentially worse, but it's going to hurt others that have never been colonized in a way that they've never experienced. So that is why I say, hey, if the tsunami is coming or is like almost upon us, what do you want to be on? Those that are experienced in navigating, or, and feel free to choose, that's all cool. But I know for myself, I'd want the people that are well versed and have escaped, and I wouldn't say flourished, but we've escaped and adapted well enough to be here right now, well enough for some of us to actually be in government, as well as others of us who are now being, huge leaders in our communities, lifting up our statistics. We want to be there, and we want to tell the story. We want to tell our story, and we want to tell the story of digital colonization. So I think that's why I make such a bold claim.
Parts of New Zealand, there's large swathes that would not have any access to any kind of digital, anything that they could get their hands on. Apart from solving the problem of poverty, how do we deal with that? Because they're basically cut off, aren't they, if they're not able to access that kind of thing.
Government and Maori, iwi, are and need to more lobby the bigger tech providers to bring those, to make cloud bases, and this is a discussion that's being had, say, in the far north, or that can be anywhere in New Zealand, and make that far more accessible for the rural communities and iwi and non-iwi, but the rural communities that live around those hubs, to give them access, and the devices themselves. That's always still an issue. It's a big governmental issue. I don't honestly know how far they've gotten it, but to make those more accessible, the devices as well as the internet providers financially accessible. But that is an issue.
Tell me a little bit about the digital program that you've been helping with women in New Zealand prisons.
For me, like my passion, my sadness was reading that 64, it's not a surprise, 64% of women in prison are our Maori wahine, and lots of them are mothers. That breaks my heart as a single mum. And so I thought, I'm agitating to push, even if it's an entrepreneurship, it's anything of a digital, innovative, future focus program to bring to these women, so that whilst they're in prison and working their way out, when they come, digital technology in their education is just a little aspect of their lives and the deeper issues, but to give them hope that perhaps they are needed and wanted at this time in life. Maori, wahine, they might be older, they might not be, they might be their mums, they might be grandmothers. That all is such a rich asset for them. If they could harness that into an innovative future, it's going to empower them. And that, at the end of the day, like I was talking about my mother, my grandmother, wahine, alcoholics, my biggest passion is really to see people's dignity restored, to see people have their own mana, and to feel that they have a place in the world, that they're wanted in the world. I could cry again, but don't worry. That's really important to me. It goes for our tamariki and our old people. There's no excuse now not to find some free online, with help, free online courses and just learn something about. My 80 plus auntie bought an artificial intelligence magazine the other day because she decided she needed to read up about it. And I'm like, yes.
Good on her. Good on her. But like, you know, like we said, life experience counts for so much. And sometimes it is literally just giving people the confidence and just saying, it's not that scary.
Yeah.
You know, just give it a go. Would you encourage people to just take that little step?
And what, even the thing that we were offering, speaking with this other amazing woman, Masa, who is an AI specialist in Auckland, you know, you can do simple things with people with no background to bring a little augmented reality picture to one of their kids' drawings. It's simple, it's instant and it's simple, and it can start to make you feel, maybe it's not magic. You can actually just learn some little steps.
It's amazing, like my kids, I will say to you know, I'll be doing something, there's something really simple, and I'll ask my 11-year-old how to do it, and she'll go, oh, you just do this. And I just think, gosh, you know, they're just going to be so much further ahead than us if they're learning at this age.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of...
It's a beautiful symmetry too. Never have we needed our kids more to teach us. Never have we needed the youth more to lead us. You know, it's a really beautiful time of the world. I don't know if they feel like that's a huge gift to them, but it is, I think.
Yeah. So for you doing the course, were there moments where you kind of went, actually, this is a little bit too hard, or this is delving a little bit too deep? And did you kind of have to sit down and have a cup of tea and take a breath and recharge?
100%. No, 100%. Just because of the nature of what I'm doing, it's so personal. And you know, the whole masters, I was trying to avoid talking about Te Tiriti Waitangi, and writing it, I'm like, oh no, it's so important that I don't sound like I am speaking for all Maori or even my hapu, you know, but the layers of emotional complexity just doing that masters. But it's really because of the topic, because I am basically saying we need Maori to lead this whole thing out. And when I say this whole thing, I mean our future. We need us here. And when I was interviewing many different people, you know, I heard their awkwardness. What I felt with Pākehā and non-Māori is they have a deep awkwardness about this relation or non-relationship with Māori. Māori are just like, don't, you know, some Māori were like, why are you sharing that stuff? Why are you even talking about, you know, it's very complex. So yeah, the whole masters and just even the writing of it, to be honest, I just wanted to chuck it against the wall so many times. But, you know, I had a great advisor and she just kept saying, yeah, I know, that's okay, but just keep doing it. Oh, yeah. When I'd go, I can't do it, it should say, no, yeah, but keep doing it. So yeah, it wasn't easy. No. And there was heaps of other stuff going on in my own personal life, and as life goes on for everybody, and of course we have COVID, but there's no excuse really. I could have had excuses galore, but I knew that the message was super important. What I was uncovering for myself was super important, not knowing where that was going to lead me. Yeah.
And so when you came out the other end, were you surprised at where you'd started, what you thought you'd get out of it, and what you actually got out of it in the end, and did things take a different trajectory than you were ever anticipating?
Yeah, totally. Well, they say at the beginning, don't be too set in any foregone conclusion, but I already had a conclusion. But I know just to be open, and so it did take many different twists and turns, especially also because of COVID. It made one-to-many conversations impossible. And actually what I found was the one-on-one Zoom conversations that I had with CEOs, government officials, iwi leaders, and people like myself, just people living their lives, is I got a lot more honesty, I think, to discuss the deep issue. And what I found is Te Tiriti Waitangi, which I was avoiding talking about at all, because I hate that feeling of you've got to, because we've got the treaty and under United Nations, you know, you better involve us. We've needed to say that, but I'm like, oh, well, if we're going to pick teams, wouldn't you just rather, if we're going to talk about the potential harms of digital colonisation, wouldn't you rather have on your team those that already know it, have seen it, have survived it, have adapted, know what to do? Wouldn't you rather have us on your team and take us forward? And So I wanted to take that tone, but I found that this awkwardness was able to be discussed at a great deeper length. And my big finding is that there's still a very big chasm between Maori, between our relationships, between Maori, Pākehā, and then what I say is non-Maori here and those that have come to New Zealand in the last, I don't know, say from 2-3 generations inwards. And you know, there's a lot of misinformation, no information. You know, no one's talked about it at school. No one's learned about it. When new people come to New Zealand, no one's like, hey, did you know we've got a treaty and it's marvellous and come to our culture and be involved in it. No, everyone's like, oh, well, we've got these people here and it's annoying, or there's nothing. Or there's like, enjoy the hiking and the, you know, 100% green image that we don't really have. So my finding was simply that. It was just like, oh, well, and then they always say, but how are you going to move forward? How? And I'm like, oh, I know how. It is actually Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It was a radical document in 1840. 2 people were looking out to new horizons. Maori secure in what we had, and Pākehā who had arrived here, and both realised what the other could bring them. So Maori did do an amazing thing with that treaty and said, we'll give you 2 things that we've never done before. We'll give you a little bit of rangatiratanga, power, a little bit here, and we'll give you some of our land. That is huge because that's our mother, that's Papatūānuku. They did something because they knew that a new horizon was coming and they were afraid of it. They'd already known it. And then Pākehā had the same choice, you know, and this would have been a radical document in 1840. Shared power, a country of shared power, how amazing. But it didn't happen. Business as usual mentality prevailed. And the rest is history. But now with COVID, there's a huge line in the sand, and we're at that same place. We're actually got an opportunity to be at the same place. 2 nations, still 2 nations, are looking out, and we could be a leader of the world. Look how the world is doing right now with the elections at this moment, with Brexit, with everything. New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand, through Te Tiriti o Waitangi, could actually be a leader and could be the rudder of this massive ship called the world and be our template for a digital future, for a post-COVID future, for a sustainable, prosperous future. We could be it, but decisions have to be made right now on both sides. Maori, we might have to just trust a little, even if it's just a little, trust something. So what I'm saying is Maori upskill digitally, Pākehā upskill culturally about te ao Maori, and try and meet somewhere, because we need to keep going.
So it sounds like quite a lot of hard work. How are you going to do that?
How do I do it? In the middle of the night when I can't sleep, right. I don't. So the World Economic Forum has given me a voice, to have a little voice, a tiny little voice, but it's a voice, and I'm going to take that crack and hopefully help to split that open. Tech Futures, where they put their money where their mouths were, and they've given me some responsibilities there about te tiriti and tikanga and Māori methodology, and plus it's about going into companies, corporates, anywhere, organisations that there is a lot of fear about learning things Māori, that they're going to get it wrong. Māori have the same fear. We have the same fear of our own culture, which is terribly sad. But I say, be courageous. Everybody, you know, and so that's what I want to do, is I want to be confident. I want to instill confidence about who we are as people back to ourselves and to people that don't know about us. So I'm building a bridge as I'm walking on it, or I'm rowing the waka and I don't know where I'm going. I'm chartering as I'm going, and I think that's kind of how I do it.
And again, it's all learning, isn't it? You're learning, you're teaching, you're spreading it all
totally
around. Yeah.
And you learn by trial and error, lots of errors.
And also the learning you've just done is quite different learning from what you'd learn if you went to law school.
Yeah.
It's done in a totally different way, so people need to understand that it's a unique way of learning.
Yeah, it's relevant. It's about what's really going on, and it's allowing you also to have a voice, not just we want to hear the references. So it is super different, It's a standalone place. Yeah, I think that I think Tech Futures is a really genuine, different way to learn. I wouldn't even call it a place of education in a way, because even that sounds so old school.
People get involved with each other and...
The cohorts themselves, you know, it's like it is exactly like how we used to, how I got through law school, is we, as the Maori students, we got through together, we'd tutor each other, we'd take turns to be the kaiko, and we stuck close, and we didn't forget who we were, so we'd have our own hui on the marae, and we'd do it our way. In a way, those cohorts have that opportunity to find out who they are as together people and learn from each other and tautoko, support one another, and it's a very, encouraging environment.
And do you watch other people going through their journeys and think, you know, are you surprised at what other people pop out the other end thinking and doing? And
even the journey itself, watching them, it's like, wow, there's some amazing people doing amazing things that I get to listen to. So amazing. It makes me have a lot of confidence in the world and going forward. Lots of different people are doing amazing different things, but then personally as well. You know, and the conversations you can have, they can be the whole process is very uncomfortable. All of us. I think that's what they keep saying. Lean into the discomfort. It's just going to be how it is. And I think everyone's lives have become uncomfortable now in all sorts of ways. And that's a good thing. It means change is really actually happening.
And like you're saying, it's uncomfortable in the area that you're in with Maori, Pākehā, trying to find their place, trying to give it a go, but being a bit scared, but uncomfortable. It all sort of transfers across, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're all needed. That's the thing with, if you want to harness a great energy, like when they're talking about AI for humanity, I mean, I want to laugh my head off, but how are we going to do it? Why I feel, yay, Māori, we've got this. It's because of one of our kōrero. It's deep in our DNA, this, Maui, harnessing the sun. Like, what an idea. I know what, I'm going to make that sun there and its energy, I'm going to make that work for me. And he does it by gathering the whole village, our iwi, his hapu, and gets them to do their tasks. He couldn't do it alone, even though he had a good idea. Well, I've never known of a better analogy to what we're facing now, especially with digital technology. That's what everyone talks about. How do we harness the energy? I say, I know how, we know how, but every one of us are important. Anything, the teacher, the mom, the journalist, the media, the doctor, anything you want to be, the person that looks after their old nana, or everyone is super important right now, but we've sort of got to put a lot of maybe bitterness and hurt, and we've got to put some of that aside. There are people working on how to figure that out. But wherever we stand in life, now there are much bigger things to be thinking about, and we sort of have to drop a lot of some of that stuff that could be barriers for us going forward, because we're all really needed at the moment, at the helm. It sounds a bit preachy, but it's what I deeply feel is our only way to harness this very powerful energy is that all of us need to help one another get to where we each of us need to be in an upskilled place. And I mean that in a really broad sense, to build each other's capacity so that we are in positions to harness, to create and harness the digital technology of the future.
Be fair to say that we, at the moment more so than ever, need quite open, curious minds.
Yeah, we need courage. We need brave minds, brave hearts as well, because it's not all about the mind, it's about the heart. And it's about the soul, you know, and I didn't even talk about creative arts, but creativity is probably, you know, it's an overused word now, but it's one of the single most important things going forward, because that's what having an open mind is. It's, you know, and the spiritual nature, like, you know, I can sometimes feel embarrassed about my own wairuatanga. What I know drives me. But, you know, that is what I'm driven by. It's what my grandmother left me, is the sense of that there's so much more that goes on than just me and you talking. There's so many more people in this room than just us that are here. That's what I love about Māori, is we've got present, past, future, all that energy to give me the energy, to give you the energy to move onwards. So yeah, we need to be open-minded, but we need to just be 100% open in every sense.
So looking back that little girl that you talked about right at the beginning, quiet little girl sort of, going about this very busy household, how do you think she'd feel if she looked at you now and went, whoa, look what I've achieved? How do you think she'd feel? She'd be proud, wouldn't she?
Yeah. And glad. She'd just be glad.
She's got a voice now, hasn't she?
Yeah, that she's got the courage that she always wanted. And it's only just come through age, that, again, when you face some of the life experiences that I've faced and live to tell that story, it's a courage that was once built on a hard anger, because that felt like it protected me. But I've gone back to just being her again, which is just this beautiful soul who really just wants to get things done. And I think she's like, oh, thank God Sarah's come home. That's how I feel.
And there'd be lots of little boys and girls out there like that who are actually adults now as well and need to go through that journey as well.
The superpower that I've always been looking for, it's so corny, oh my God, it's corny as, but the superpower is love. It's that really powerful, bold and courageous, open-hearted love that I found firstly from my grandmother. So yeah, I've come home and that's exciting.
Well, thank you. That's an amazing story. Amazing. And I would imagine that you'd encourage loads of people to start investigating where they can.
Thank you, Sacha.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Well, as you heard, Sara is a force to be reckoned with. Her brain is big and her knowledge vast. But what stuck with me after speaking to Sara was her passion and her aspiration to share her insights with others. The fact that she wants to take us all along with her on this challenge she's set herself to open the most tightly closed of minds. Sara is proof that the digital world is far from sterile and that passion counts for a lot, and combining the two can make for some pretty impactful work. Perhaps you too have that internal desire waiting to be unleashed. If you're interested in learning more about the Maori perspective of the Treaty of Waitangi and how those key principles could broadly link to our digital transformation today, see the episode webpage for more. You can also read more there about Sara's role with the World Economic Forum and the mantle she's carrying for a Maori seat at that global table. If you've enjoyed this and want to hear more stories from New Zealanders making impact in their own way, subscribe to the podcast in your podcast player for more.